Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast, Green Socialist Notes, is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that we ran on in 2020. And there's no heat in here. I don't know what the temperature is. It's about 10 degrees outside. I don't know what happened to the heat, but I got my jacket and my long underwear on. I didn't know the heat wasn't on. So if I look like I'm shivering, I am. But you know what this guy with the funny hairdo and who every time he talks makes no sense, Trump. I mean, it's hard to believe that he's actually been increasing in his favorability ratings since he became president. And I can't quite explain why that is. Maybe it's just because he's doing something, but it's not a good situation. I mean, we've got big tech groveling before Trump. For example, Google said they're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, but only for U.S. users. And we've had this just more mean-spirited cruelty from Trump with this freeze on U.S. aid programs. I'm freezing so much I can't say freeze, but a freeze on U.S. aid programs, which were 42% of all humanitarian aid in the world last year, according to the United Nations. So he gutted the agency, incapacitated it by putting 60 senior career staff on administrative leave, and froze the funding. And this affects everything from food and medicine for Gaza, food relief for famine in Sudan, firewood for rural Ukrainians who don't have power because the Russians have bombed the hell out of the infrastructure. Everything from those things to HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment programs in places where the disease is endemic, like in Africa and Ukraine. So this is just, as I said, mean-spirited cruelty. And I think what's going to happen is if the U.S. continues in this way, China's going to step in and not provide as much aid, but provide some aid and just look a lot better than the U.S. by comparison. And the global South is going to, react. The U.S. is going to reach all-time lows in terms of favorability in the global South. Of course, Trump doesn't care. And then another thing, and he's done so many things, but I'm just going to hit on a few of them. Trump's Office of Personnel Management sent a letter to 2 million federal employees saying, why don't you resign and we'll pay you until October, the end of September. And he's really trying to clean out the civil service so he can put his own loyal hacks in. And this move is in blatant violation of civil service laws. There's no budget line to pay for people who aren't working. And anybody stupid enough to take his offer ought to know that Trump's going to stiff them anyway. But the point of this is to intimidate federal workers into looking for other jobs so Trump can put his hacks in. And the point is to gut federal programs that protect the people and the environment. And then one of the scariest things happened last night is Elon Musk is trying to capture the Treasury's payment system. And that's the computerized payment system that, is how the Treasury pays its bills, the federal government's bills. But if Musk gets control of it, it'll enable Trump to defund any program he doesn't like, which is also in violation of the law because these are congressionally appropriated funds. And the president has no right to stop those programs from going forward once Congress has authorized them. And Musk also has cleaned out the Office of Personnel Management and put his own employees from X, or the old Twitter, who know how to work computer systems, and they're denying the civil service workers in the Office of Personnel Management access to their own computers. Now, Musk is a private citizen, and he's taken control of a government office. And this is not just about efficiency. This is a coup. It's just incredible to watch this, and you have to wonder where are the Democrats, or for that matter, the Greens, on all these Trump atrocities. It just seems like everybody's shell-shocked and unable to respond. So we're in a bad situation, and we need to wake up. Now, it's a basic truth that if we're going to fight back, we got to have an educated and engaged working class that is fighting for its own interests. And we've had lots of happy talk, from the left about a revived labor movement. But frankly, that's just wisdom past the graveyard. The reality is unions are still losing ground. This week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with its annual report on Tuesday on union membership. And it showed that the share of America's workers who are in unions declined from 10% in 2023 to 9.9% in 2024. And in the private sector, it declined from 6% in 2023 to 5.9% in 2024. And this is despite the fact that polls show union approval ratings stand at 70%, which is higher than it's been really since the mid-50s, when it was up to 75%. And polls also show that 60% of workers would join a union if they could. Yet the union movement is shrinking. And then one of the things Trump did this week was he fired one of the three remaining members of the National Labor Relations Board, a woman named Gwen Wilcox, who is a Biden appointee. Now, she's suing on the grounds that Trump, has no legal grounds for doing this. And, if the courts follow the law, she'll probably win that case because an NLRB member cannot be fired except for neglect of duty or malfeasance in office, which is not the case for Gwen Wilcox. And Trump also fired the National Labor Relations Board's general counsel, Biden appointee named Jennifer Abruzzo. And she acts like the prosecutor and plays a key role in shaping board policy. So the general counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, is probably going to be fired because Biden terminated a man named Peter Robb, who was a lawyer appointed by Trump, and that was upheld in the courts. The ability of the labor movement to use the NLRB is being gutted by Trump. So, let's close my opening remarks by talking a little bit about how the labor movement might revive itself. And I don't think that's going to happen until the left party, in a systematic way, sends its members into unions to transform them from today's defensive business unions into proactive social movement unions. But without organized intervention in the unions by a left-wing party, I don't think we're going to have a labor movement that is more than the business unions that we now have, that are narrowly and defensively focused on servicing a shrinking membership, which, as I said, is down now to 9.9% of the total workforce and 5.9% of the private workforce in the private sector. A labor action committee by the Green Party or some damn left-wing party that we need to create should focus on helping party activists as workers get into these unions, into workplaces, and organize rank and file workers in their own workplaces. It's got to be done from the bottom up. And the program of this organizing should be aimed at transforming unions into social movement unions that engage and educate their own members and democratize the unions, that organize the unorganized into unions, that as social movement unions join forces with other progressive social movements. And this is what's been missing in all the efforts, over the last several decades at, labor caucuses, reform caucuses in the unions. The other thing they should do is promote independent working class political action. We've had reform movements I was in one of them, Teamsters for the Democratic Union. Actually, I'm still a member. Groups like Labor Notes, which tries to bring these caucuses and reform efforts together every other year and does a lot of training. But both of those groups and other union reform caucuses have avoided the question of independent political action because it's divisive. A lot of the left still thinks they can, do better to get what they need through the Democratic Party. There's an emergency workplace organizing committee, which is a joint project of United Electrical Workers, UE, and the DSA, which is focused on supporting organizing new workplaces like Starbucks, but independent political action is not on their agenda. But the unions today are not going to break with the Democrats unless there's intervention by the left within the unions and gets the workers organized behind that program. And they're not going to be transformed unless there's a systematic organizing going on. And I'm afraid to, just to be honest, it's way beyond the organizational capacity and financial capacity of the National Green Party to do this at this point. Until it gets serious about organizing its own supporters into strong locals and expecting them to fund the party with regular dues. So we do have the capacity to do this kind of organizing. But I would say if you're a worker who's interested in doing this kind of organizing, you might want to check out a new group called the Rank and File Project. And we'll put their link in the website on the chat. It's rankandfileproject.com. And they're holding trainings in rank and file organizing to transform the unions, organize the unorganized, link up with progressive movements, which these reform caucuses have been trying to do, but also uniquely from what I've observed over the last several decades, they promote independent political action. Their website description includes this statement: we think unions must serve a vital role in forging a political alternative to the hard-right authoritarian Republican Party and the fake corporate-friendly progressivism of the Democratic Party. Now, I haven't heard that kind of statement in support of independent working class politics from any of the reform caucuses in the unions that we've had since the 1970s. And the leadership of this rank and file project are former union organizers or current union organizers. They're members of the Bread and Roses caucus of the DSA, which calls for independent political action. But, I'm a little skeptical. In practice, they supported Democrats like Bernie Sanders. So, just to sum up that little rant, we're in a bad situation. People seem shell-shocked. And one of the things we need to do is reform and get the labor movement moving as part of a fight back to all this madness. So I don't know if you can see me shivering. I am. I don't know what the temperature is in here. But anyway, let's see what your questions and comments are, and we'll have a talk about what's going on. So we put the statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics press release about the, state of organizing in the labor movement and how we've lost, or the percentage of organized workers has gone down from last year. So I don't see any questions coming up. I'll start reading comments. Vicky Corden says the way Trump dismantles the institutions is very similar to what Hitler did in 1933. It took 52 days. This is a very serious situation. Amen. Scout Trooper 164 says, I can't help but feel Trump is both a salesman and following Putin's plan to destroy America. How the fuck can war with Panama be any good, or tariffs? This is a mess. Yeah, the tariffs. That could blow up in Trump's face because it's going to, promote inflation. And one of the reasons people voted for Trump is that they were concerned about inflation. A question, do you think the courts will be able to hold on to democracy in the U.S.? I think there are a lot of judges that will hold to the Constitution in the lower levels. The problem is Trump got a lot of people into the appeals and Supreme Courts. And Biden got some in there too, but it depends on the circuit, the Circuit Court of Appeals. They're pretty diverse politically. And it's, we got to use the courts, but we can't count on them alone. Joanna Munley, do you think the Democrats will rethink Citizens United? I've talked about this before. Citizens United opened the door for all this dark money and super PACs, which Justice Kennedy said, and he was mistaken in this, that it would allow, he was okay with all this big money coming in because it would be transparent and then people could make their judgments on that. But the problem is the way it's been, it's worked out is a lot of this money is dark. It goes through 501c4s that don't have to report their donors. And so we don't know who's giving. It could be foreign entities as well as, the oligarchs in our country. And so now how would you get Citizens United repealed? Legislation. The problem is the Democrats, they don't have control of either house right now. And the Republicans don't want to touch the campaign finance system. So it's again a reason why we need a real political alternative to the neoliberal Democrats who have had plenty of opportunities to do something about Citizens United. The first 2 years of Biden's administration, he had both houses. He could have done stuff, but he let the filibuster stand, which gave the Republicans a veto. And so any progressive legislation, was hard to get passed because of that veto. The only things Biden really did get passed was reconciliation because they were budget items. Campaign finance is a big part of it. Although, as I've also argued, I think the bigger thing is our winner-take-all single-member district election system, which puts third parties like the Green Party in the spoiler position and makes it hard for us to elect people. With ranked choice voting, we get rid of the spoiler problem, and with proportional ranked choice voting, that is ranked choice voting in multi-member districts, which creates proportional representation, we can get representation if it's a 10-member district, about 10% will get us a seat. And if we get 20%, we get 2 seats out of those 10. And we get our fair and proportional share. We'd have a platform in legislatures that would help legitimate us and give us a voice in those legislatures, in the media. It would be a big change. And I think that is even more of a key than campaign finance reform to creating an open, multi-party democracy in this country. Well, okay. Scout Trooper 164. RFK Jr. is smearing Bernie by claiming he's corrupt as hell. That's rich as shit. But people will believe in it because people are scared of the socialist bogeyman. Isn't that ridiculous? I don't know. Bernie, putting the socialist label on him, I don't think hurts him much because he comes across as authentic and caring about, working people and caring that, the oligarchs, the big corporations have too much power. And it resonates with a lot of people. And, calling that socialist, I don't think changes people's minds. On the other hand, the people that are on the right, it's not changing their minds either. So, RFK Jr., that guy's bad news. And I guess it looks like he's probably going to get confirmed. And that's bad news for public health and the administration of health programs under what's the department he's heading? The Department of Health and Used to be health, education, and welfare, Hugh, and now educate health and welfare. Is that what it's called? Anyway, that's another area where we got a lot of fights ahead of us. Vicky Corden, any thoughts on the 2 recent airplane crashes? Trump fired competent people to be replaced by loyalty. Musk helped with this atrocity, and there are consequences already. You may know more than I do. I don't know that Trump has fired people. I know he, said, "Oh, this is because of DEI, democracy or diversity." What's the E stand for? And include equality or equity and inclusion. And that was a baseless statement on his part, but he just took it as an opportunity to change the subject and deflect from the fact that it happened and raise one of his culture war points. And he dominated the news cycle, unfortunately. He's good at that, and the media is complicit. And, as far as the airplane crashes go, I haven't been following that closely, but I do understand that at the Washington Reagan Airport, they were understaffed that evening. I may be wrong about that, but I think I heard that. And if that's true, that's a problem. And this goes back to, Reagan going after the Air Traffic Controllers Union, who was not only going for better wages, but better working conditions and safety conditions, having adequate staff. And again, that's a bipartisan crime, because what Reagan did was take a plan to attack PATCO. That was the name of the union. It was developed under the Carter administration, and Reagan just, took the plan and implemented it. So this is a problem. These things happen when the government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and that is, enforce safety standards and, have adequate staffing and funding to do that. Vicky Corden, Guantanamo Bay will be used as a detention center for migrants. It sounds like a concentration camp. It is a concentration camp. And they don't have the physical facilities to take the tens of thousands of people they're talking about housing there. They did once house tens of thousands of people who were immigrants from, I guess it was Haiti. But those physical facilities have deteriorated, so they got to rebuild them. In the meantime, if they start dumping people there, they're going to be inadequately housed. This is, again, just a crime against humanity. And it's another one of those issues we got to be active on. Well, I'm shivering in here, boy. Scout Trooper 164, I feel like we're in a Cold War. It will end with both America and Russia's economies capsizing. Any thoughts on that? Or am I being overly cynical? Well, Trump could capsize the American economy with these tariffs. Russia's economy is hurting. And particularly if the oil and gas and sanctions are strengthened by clapping down on the shadow fleet they've been using to export their oil and liquefied natural gas. That's really going to hurt Russia's revenues, because that accounts for about 30% of their revenues. But I think the problem is Putin, this war is how he stays in power. It's really about, keeping the society militarized and politically repressed, so no dissent can emerge, and not losing in Ukraine, because if he loses in Ukraine, he's going to be in trouble politically at home. And for Trump, he doesn't care about Ukraine or Russia. He cares about himself, but he's dumb enough to, self-destruct the U.S. economy with these tariffs and the cuts in federal spending, which will reduce demand, just creating chaos. And, investors aren't going to invest when they're uncertain as to what's going to happen. Layoffs, people don't have money to spend, the economy goes down. So I think it's not that a Cold War between Russia and America is doing this, it's that the leadership of both countries is doing it to themselves by their policies. So I don't know if you're being cynical or realistic, but I think there's a possibility that, we could head into a world depression, given particularly America, because it's such a bigger economy than Russia, could do with these trade wars that Trump he started today. 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada and 10% from China. Every competent economist tells him he's crazy, but he thinks he's smart. We'll see. Joanna Munley, are you supportive of the organization Indivisible? Is there any merit in getting involved with this organization? Well, they are, their approach is to elect Democrats in place of Republicans. I've met with them not many years ago after they first got started when Trump came in. And they were pretty hostile to me. I don't even know why they invited me to speak to them, but they were hostile because I was saying, we can't count on the Democrats to fight back. We need a political alternative. And they were absolutely opposed to that. They just thought that the Greens should go away or come back into the Democratic Party, or I was never in it, but into the Democratic Party and support their candidates. And, I'm looking at the member of Congress we just elected, a Democrat, who right away voted for that anti-immigration bill, the Laken, what's it called? Miley Laken bill, and took another terrible vote with the Republicans. So, with Democrats like that, who needs Republicans? That, I think, is their problem. I think the only merit in getting involved, I don't know where you are, but, you would, develop relationships with other activists. The problem is the whole orientation is to mobilize and support for the Democratic Party, which, as I've argued many times, is, it's not in its DNA to support a progressive populist economic program of redistribution, because the wealthy funders and the, professional managerial class that are the principal mass base for the Democratic Party now, and populate their the staffs and the politician positions in the Democratic Party. They don't want to pay progressive taxes to support a redistributive economic program. Things like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, tuition-free public college. They don't want to pay for that. And so that's why the Democrats are a neoliberal party, and it's in its DNA. And of course, the Republicans are further to the right, but there's a huge vacuum on the left that, the left should fill with its own political party. When we go into the Democratic Party, we disappear as a left, and we become cheerleaders for the neoliberals and do their grunt work. And that's, been the problem for the left since the 1930s, when the communists had a popular front policy and brought most of the left and the labor movement into the Democratic Party, and it's never reemerged as a left. So there are people that consider themselves socialists out there working for neoliberal Democrats. And, the left in our analysis and our identity as an alternative, our program, our policy alternatives are not out there as a term of debate in mainstream political debate. And we won't have that until we build an independent left party. So I would say, get involved in your local Green Party and, try to make that work better. Scout Trooper 164, you know what angers me? The investigators looking at Trump were fired immediately, not given a 30-day notice. I guess you're talking about the Justice Department people that were involved in those prosecutions and investigating the evidence. Another sign of him trying to overload the system and gain power. Exactly. He's purging the government of anybody that would question anything he does. And, that's what authoritarian governments do. And they cripple or capture the judicial system, the criminal justice system. So it's used to go after their political enemies and protect their own corruption. That's where we're headed. And attacking the Justice Department is part of Trump's agenda to do that. Well, waiting for a question. I'm looking in the chat. Question is, do you think boycotts will help? Well, boycotts of who and what? To organize a boycott, you need organization. And then, what's the target? And I'm not sure, I know a lot of people are going to blue sky from X or old Twitter, but it doesn't seem like enough to affect Trump, to affect Musk. And, he's got enough of a base on the right wing to keep that thing going. So, that's one boycott that has been suggested. There are situations in which boycotts work, but without, in the abstract, I don't know, what boycott we're talking about. I think the boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel is something that would help put the pressure on Israel. In South Africa, when the U.S. finally got sanctions installed against South Africa, that was 1986. Congress passed it over the veto of Ronald Reagan. The South African ruling class had a choice, either to see their economy ruined or to, dispense with apartheid so they could keep doing business. And they chose the latter. The difference between Israel and South Africa is South African apartheid ruling class depended on black labor. The Israeli economy doesn't depend on Palestinian labor. They can import it from countries like Thailand, where we just had, 5 hostages released who were agricultural workers in Israel. People from Sri Lanka, India, other Arab countries, they come in and do a lot of the, working class jobs in Israel. And so Israel doesn't need the Palestinian labor, which gives them less leverage than the African working class did in South Africa. Nonetheless, Israel is integrated into the world economy. And if they are, boycotted, there's divestment, there's sanctions against them, they're going to have a choice between, being able to continue as a prosperous country or facing, economic collapse. So I think that's a case where, boycotts will help. Vicky Corden, Trump is going after the press also. CBS had to give transcripts of their interview with Harris, the part of the interview that wasn't published. Jim Acosta quit instead of cheering Trump, et cetera. Yeah, Jim Acosta, the CNN host, who's a longtime reporter, had the 10 a.m. slot, and CNN said, we're going to give you the midnight slot. And Jim Acosta quit. I guess he's on Substack now. He's going to write. But Acosta was critical of Trump and, asked, hard questions of Trump. And so CNN seems to be accommodating Trump. CBS is giving those transcripts. That may be, I think Trump sued them as well. So this is a case where the media is rolling over instead of fighting, and it's distressing. So yeah, Trump going after the press, he's been doing that forever, the fake news, he calls it. When he's the fake news, he spreads all this, fake nonsense. Vicky Corden, if you have not heard of House Bill 1484 in Mississippi, read about it. It sounds like slavery back. And I see the next comment, slavery is legal in almost every state. If you've ever been in jail or prison, you'd know. Yeah, and that's the exception in I think it's the 14th Amendment. It says slavery is illegal, but except for cases of, incarceration for criminal offenses. So I haven't seen that bill. Maybe you can give us a little more information in the notes. So, but in Mississippi, it's not surprising that Mississippi would introduce that kind of legislation. Scout Trooper 164, we need to stop America from becoming the next Russia. This is supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, not the anti-gay, anti-color, and extremist. That's the wrong book. Yeah, well, Trump admires authoritarian leaders. He likes to say, look at Xi Jinping, when he makes a decision, the people, do what he says. And that's what he wants. And, democracy is foreign to his concept of how government should be. So, as General Milley said, Trump is a fascist to the core. And, he had firsthand experience of that. So, yeah, the problem of spreading authoritarianism, the rise of the far right in Europe and the United States is a real problem. I mean, there are people on the campus left, the people that are with any state that is in conflict with the U.S., just because the U.S., in their view, is the only imperialist power. And, so they, I lost my point. My brain froze along with my body. It's cold in here. Well, what I was talking about was, the spread of authoritarianism. My point was a lot of the campus so-called left, likes to say that the Ukro Nazis are running Ukraine, which is a slander on, Zelensky, for example, who, is a Jew and the son of, or the grandson of, somebody who fought in the Red Army against the Nazis. And, it's just wrong. But you look at the support in elections, 2019 in Ukraine, the far right had a coalition. They got 1.56% for their presidential candidate in the first round. So he was eliminated. And in the parliamentary election, their slate got 2.16%, if I remember correctly about that. And so that was well below the 5% threshold. So they got no representation for their slate. Compare that to the AfD in Germany or National Rally in France, Maloney's in power in Italy, and Trump's in power in the United States. So it's pretty hypocritical for people to worry about the far right in Ukraine when they got it right in their own backyard. Scout Trooper 164. What can we do regarding companies like Costco that want to keep DEI rights? I thought Costco caved. Am I mistaken? I know they, were pretty good. I have a cousin that, worked for them and thought they, was given the alternatives, was a pretty good company to work for. But I thought they caved. Now, what can we do? Well, we should speak up for inclusion. And okay, yeah, I think Costco caved, if I'm not mistaken. And we got to speak up. If we're silent, then the Trump message sounds like it's the conventional wisdom that everybody agrees with. We got to express our dissent. And the first thing that authoritarians want is for us to be intimidated and not speak up, so they can do what they want without resistance. So, what can we do? Speak up and say, we should have equal opportunity for all people, which is what those DEI programs were designed to do. They're not reverse discrimination like Trump and his ilk like to say. Bill 1484, Vicki Corden says, in Mississippi, we'll create an illegal alien certified bounty hunter program. Okay, so yeah, it's like slave hunters back in during the pre-Civil War days. You get a bounty for capturing a runaway slave and bringing them back. And now they're going to, they're going to have vigilantes out there grabbing people who they think might be undocumented people in the United States. And all that can do is create situations of violence, because these vigilantes, they're going to be armed, and any resistance, they may, get violent. And the resistance may get violent. This is a program for, violence. If there are undocumented people with warrants out for their arrest for crimes, that's one thing. And let the, proper authorities, arrest those people, using legal procedures and, according to the law. When you let loose vigilantes, you're just asking for trouble. So that is, that sounds like something Mississippi would do. Vicki Corden, Bill 1484, if an illegal alien does not get deported quickly, could be prisoned for life, which is basically a form of slavery. It is online. Too long to write in the space. Well, I think you gave us enough, Vicki. So if they don't get deported quickly, they could be in prison for life. So what would that mean? It means if the federal system doesn't deport them quickly, Mississippi would just imprison them for life? Yeah, that's a form of slavery. It's also, it could be expensive for Mississippi. This just sounds like a bunch of yahoos writing legislation that makes no sense, morally or practically. So waiting for a question here. I see one in the chat, Scout Trooper 164. Why do I feel like macho folks in charge want to go back to the 1950s? Or why I feel that is because they want to remain in ignorance and the unknown. People in the 50s did not have rights and didn't know much. When they talk about make America great again, when Trump says that, a lot of people think, before the civil rights era, and they want to remove the competition from women and people of color for jobs and places in higher education and for their privileged status. And that accounts for a significant part of Trump's base. I estimated about a third of the population. Although to be optimistic or, look at the bright side, back when Wallace was running on states' rights and Nixon with his Southern strategy, they were racist campaigns appealing to that white supremacist vote. Together, they got 62% of the white working class vote. Trump isn't getting anywhere near that. If you look at, I'm trying to remember the statistics that I wrote up in this article. If you use college degree as the divide between middle class and working class, Trump has gained no percentage of the vote of people without a college degree from 2016 to 2020 to today. That movement, that realignment of, basically the bigoted vote to the Republican Party has run its course, and Trump hasn't increased it. So that means majorities of Americans are more racially tolerant, more tolerant of women's rights and LGBTQ rights, certainly than they were in 1968. And even, look at how fast gay marriage was accepted. Between 2004, when the Republicans put all these anti-marriage equality referendums on the ballots to mobilize the vote for Bush, and when was it? 2012, when the Supreme Court said gay marriage was legal. That's just 6 years, and people's attitudes change very quickly on that. And I think the inclination of most people is to be tolerant and live and let live. So I think we got to look at that optimistic side. And the other part of Trump's vote is the people that don't want to pay progressive taxes to protect people in the environment. And that conservative vote is always there. But you look at the polls on how people feel about programs like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, public tuition-free public education, a public free child care program, and taxing the rich. Strong majorities, over 60% in all those issues, support them. So that is the base that the Democrats can't mobilize because they're committed to neoliberalism and, public austerity, so they don't have to pay taxes. It's there for the organizing by us on the left. And so we just need to understand that and have faith that we go out and organize and put forward good candidates and good policy alternatives, and we're going to win support and start to take back our country from the oligarchs. Okay, well, I'm waiting for a question. I see Vicky Corden says, I remember undocumented immigrants have been deported in military planes, and that tells us that the military will obey Trump's orders. It is concerning that Trump will use the military against anyone. Well, against American civilians, and whether they're documented or not. And that is going to be a crucial question going forward. I heard one military guy, Malcolm Nance. You may have heard him on MSNBC in the past. He was one of the first military people to come out to criticize the use of torture by the Bush-Cheney government. He's not he's pretty much a hawk on foreign policy. I don't agree with him there, but he does know the military. And he said, orders to implement policies against civilians are illegal. And what you learn in the military, and this came after, as he said in a recent commentary, came after the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. I got trained this when I was in the Marine Corps, is that you have a duty to disobey illegal orders. And Malcolm Nance said the military might split over this with, the right wing carrying out Trump's orders and the more progressive officers and soldiers and Marines and so forth refusing. And that could be a crisis because both sides got arms, and, who wins out? That's one reason why the left should not denigrate military people. We should try to win them over. If you study revolutions, they don't succeed unless the rank and file soldiers in particular, but also a good portion of the officers come over to the side of the revolution. Otherwise, the revolutionaries get slaughtered. And that's why we should, have relationships with people in the military to present our point of view and win them over to our politics. That's just, basic radical politics 101. Although in this country, there's, because the U.S. has been so vicious in its imperialist wars from Vietnam to Iraq, it's harder for that kind of organizing to be accepted, but it's absolutely necessary. What the military does when Trump starts ordering them to do things that are illegal in violation of the laws that say the American military doesn't enforce domestic laws. They're not trained to do that. They're trained to go out and kill people and blow up things and hold land in wars, not to do law enforcement. So if they're sent out to do law enforcement, a lot of bad things are likely to happen. So it's something we got to keep an eye on, and stay in touch with any military people. Vicky Corden, I remember undocumented work immigrants have been deported in military planes. Oh, I just answered that question. Here we go. Vicky asks, the Colombian president refused the planes, these are military planes, because the migrants were in shackles and could not use the bathroom. So Colombia sent its own planes to pick its immigrants up, so immigrants were treated better. Yeah. President Petro of Colombia, basically said we're not accepting these military planes, and send them back on commercial planes, and we can take them back. So I thought that was a good bit of resistance on the part of Colombia. Trump immediately said he was going to slap sanctions on them, and Petro said, well, we'll slap back, but they came to an agreement. So, undocumented Colombians who are taken in by ICE are going to be sent back to Colombia, but it won't be on military planes, I guess. So it's kind of a partial victory. But it's good that, Petro stood up to Trump, unlike so many, oligarchs in the media and some leaders of other countries. Scout Trooper 164, why do I feel like the majority of Trump's actions will backfire on him fast? Not just economically, but also because of the realistic outcomes that will come into play. Well, you're asking me why you feel that way. I think you feel that way because it's, a pretty good odds that a lot of what Trump's doing is going to upset a lot of people, and that will politically backfire on him. And you say fast, I hope it's fast. Right now, like I said at the top, it seems the progressive side of the political spectrum, whether they're, radicals or just liberals or even moderates, are shell-shocked. They're like, somebody goes into a war and suddenly they freeze because they don't know what to do. There's so much going on around them. That seems to be where we're at, but I'm confident people will find their voice and begin to resist. But, Trump's moving fast. As somebody pointed out, Hitler destroyed the institutions of German democracy in, 52 days, 53 days. And, Germany didn't recover until after they were defeated in a war. Hopefully it's not going to get that far in this country, and people will resist. Okay, I'm looking for comments. Here's one from Scout. Okay, Joanna Munley. I feel like I need to learn more about the recent impeachment of the president of South Korea. I feel like I and other Americans can learn from this. Yeah, the South Koreans went out on the street. The president of Korea declared martial law, looked like it was the beginning of a coup. And South Korean democracy was won against an authoritarian government by mass protests, suffering, some real severe repression, including massacres in the 70s and 80s. And by the time they got to the end of the 80s, they secured a democratic republic with, pretty free and fair elections. And most South Koreans don't want to go away from that. So they came out and they protested. and it pressured their representatives in the parliament to impeach the president that tried this implementing martial law on kind of trumped up grounds that North Korea was about to attack or something. So I think we also should learn from Brazil. Bolsonaro tried to do what Trump did and have mass demonstrations to overturn an election he lost. And the Brazilian government prosecuted him and those people. And they were convicted. And I guess Bolsonaro is barred from political activity for, many years. Instead, what we got here is Trump got away with it. And now he's pardoned all the people that participated in that attempt to intimidate Congress into not certifying the 2020 election results in the presidential election. So, we need to take hope from what people in South Korea did, what Brazil did, what we see in Georgia and Serbia. Mass movements of the people can change the politics of countries. And in some of those countries, they're going out and facing repression and violence from the state, much more severe than we've experienced up to date. So I think we should take hope from all of those cases, and South Korea included. I think we got time for one more question or comment. I'm looking in the chat if Jenny's doing the work behind the scenes today. Here we go. Vicki Corden, when Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, and miscellaneous benefits were stopped, I heard a lot of people called the switchboard to get their benefits back. And what was the response? I know that they were really jammed up. And then the government, the Trump administration had to say, well, wait a minute, we don't mean Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, SNAP. But it's still not clear what they do mean. And I know, like I mentioned, USAID, which does a lot of good charitable and humanitarian work, support, media and, medical treatment. Okay, we got another question here. I'll just finish the last one. So I was talking about USAID, those cuts. What happened there was a lot of these programs stopped, and then Marco Rubio, who's the State Department secretary, said, well, we don't mean, like food for Sudan and, some other programs he named. But the programs themselves, they're not sure what's going on, because a lot of these Trump administration, memos and orders and executive orders are not really clear about what they do mean. So it becomes almost like instead of the rule of law or regulation or executive order, it's just the rule of the whim of whoever the leaders are at the moment, which is a real problem. So Sean Young asked, could you recommend some resources on better understanding dismantling the military-industrial complex? Happy New Year. Let's hope it is. There was a lot of literature about this in the 80s, which I would suggest going back to. One person to read is Seymour Melman, who was an industrial engineer at Columbia, who was trying to figure out, he figured it out, I think, what we need to do to convert military production to civilian production. So that's one side of it. Ron Dellums, the congressman from Oakland and Berkeley, back in the 80s, he became head of the Armed Services Committee for a while, and they did some good studies on how we could cut the military budget. Code Pink, not my favorite organization, but they did a nice compendium of studies of what weapons programs could be cut. And they came up with cuts of 74% of the military budget at that time, which I think was 2020 or 2021, which happens to be the amount I suggested the military budget could be cut when I ran for president. And so that's another place to look. So that's more on the technical side. On the political side, we need a movement that says, the United States should be the world's humanitarian superpower and make friends instead of enemies, instead of being the world's military superpower that's trying to police the world and intervenes in all countries all over the world. Special operations. Nick Turse, you can read his stuff, has documented how we have, special operations forces doing operations in like 180 countries, something like that. Almost all the countries of the world. We're everywhere. And other countries don't like that. So, why don't we help them get clean energy and clean water and food self-sufficiency? Of course, we don't do that because we're a capitalist nation, a capitalist state that supports capitalist corporations exploiting these countries. So that means we need system change. We need an eco-socialist alternative. So I hope that helps answer your question. But Seymour Melman, I think, would be the guy I would start with, because he, really understood how the military-industrial complex worked as a network of businesses and state managers in the Pentagon. There's a writer today, Melman passed, more than a decade ago, but Bill Hartung writes a lot about military spending and those programs. He's another guy that will help you understand the military-industrial complex. So I hope those recommendations help. And I've been here freezing for an hour. I don't know. Hey, Angela Walker, we got to bring you back on the show. I just see you in the chat. How are you doing? I see you occasionally on Facebook when my email tells me you put something up there. And so Violet at Content Boutique, Sean, any chance you could explain what topics a grassroots startup National Green Party campaign? Any chance you could explain what topics a grassroots startup National Green Party? Can we start now? I'm not sure what you're asking, Sean. Are you talking about issues we can develop a national grassroots campaign in the Green Party about? We're at no loss of issues. But I think what we should be doing in the Trump era is building our locals to the point where we can elect not just hundreds like we have, but thousands of people to local office. And on that basis, get people in the state legislatures and then the House of Representatives. That's where we're going to have leverage on national politics. I don't think the National Green Party has the staff capacity, the funding to organize a national campaign around an issue. Our issue should be getting organized at the local level, like we did when we started in the 80s. Unlike the previous third-party attempts, the Peace and Freedom Party, the People's Party in 72 and 76, the Citizens Party with Barry Commoner running for president, they tried to build a party out of a presidential campaign. What we did in 1984 was go out and organize locals. And then people began running and electing people to local office as soon as 1986. And by the time Ralph Nader was let us use his name in a presidential campaign in 1996, we had the capacity to get him on the ballot in 23 states because we built a base. And then in 2000, we got him on 46 states. But what we did in those years was build a base. And I think we've lost that, and we got to go back to it, particularly during the Trump years. It's going to be really hard to, lead an issue campaign that moves the federal government. But we can build that organized base that has real power at the grassroots. So the next time there's an opportunity at the national level, we're ready. And like I said, I think we get a few Greens, a caucus of Greens in the House of Representatives, and then we're going to have leverage on national policy because the Democrats are going to have to give us something to get something on legislation. And we'll have a legitimate platform to speak to national issues and get into major media. So I think that's what we got to approach. I think the issue campaigns, we can do national issues locally. We can campaign for Medicare for all in local campaigns. We can inject it in congressional campaigns, even if we don't have our own candidate. There are lots of ways to do that. I just don't think the National Party, until it, expects members to pay dues, so it has money, is not going to be able to do that. So went a few things over. I'm glad to see everything's all right, all things considered, Angela says. So great to see you or hear you, Angela. And the hour is up, and since the heat isn't on in here, I don't want to catch a cold or something freezing. But I see people are talking in the chat, so I say let's leave the chat up a little bit. Next week, I'm going to have a guest from Poland. Actually, she's in London, and I got to get her name off my phone so I pronounce her last Polish name with all those consonants correctly. So give me a second here. It's Eva Pospisinska. And she is a member of Razem, which is a left-wing eco-socialist party in Poland. I met with her. She's working with the London chapter of Razem. A lot of people in Eastern Europe have to work in Western Europe to support their families. And so Eva is part of the London chapter. She's in the leadership of the London chapter of Razem. Razem has representation in the National Parliament. They're one of the stronger left-wing parties supporting Ukraine. And they're in alliance with the Ukrainian socialists and Sociální ruch, the social movement, in a couple of European. There's a Central Eastern European left alliance that both Sociální ruch and Razem are in. And there's a new caucus in the European Parliament called the what's it called? The Green Left Alliance for the People and the Planet. I think that's its name, which both parties are in. And so, and Eva also is, she's young. I don't know exact age, but I don't think she's reached 30 yet, but she's really sharp. And so I wanted, people in this country to hear from her what's going on in Europe, what's going on with youth radical politics in Europe. And so she'll be the guest next week. And I pretty much have guests lined up for the rest of February, except for February 22nd, which will be just before the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I've asked a Ukrainian activist to come on. Didn't hear back from him. I just asked him last night. So I expect to hear back from him. But if I can't get him, there are others I can get. We'll cover that on that day. And what else? Well, I'm trying to remember. I'm so busy with so many things. Oh, we're going to talk about public health with a public health expert, a socialist for many decades who did a lot of work in Ukraine on public health, particularly HIV, AIDS prevention and treatment. And we're going to talk about what a disaster the Trump administration is on public health at home and around the world. So those things are coming up, and thanks everybody for being here, and we'll be back next Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And if you miss us on the live stream, the podcast goes out the following Monday. So everybody have a good week, and like I said, speak up, don't be silent. That's what Trump wants you to be.